Resourceful Designer, episode 280, a look back, a look ahead, 2021 edition.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now your host. He'd love it if you became more successful than he is. Mark DeCote.
Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in, and happy holidays to you. I want to thank you for listening, especially if you're a new listener. If you're new to the podcast, this is your very first episode, or you only just recently started listening, I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you get a lot out of this podcast like many other people have told me that they have. Now, in continuing my annual tradition, the last podcast episode of 2021, which is this episode, is my look back and look ahead edition. It's where I reflect and, of course, share with you what my year has been like as a design business owner. And I'll take a bit to look ahead at what I would like to accomplish in 2022. So let's first start with some of the goals that I had set out last year when I did my look back and look ahead episode. Things that I wanted to accomplish in 2021. Let's see how I did. Well, it doesn't look like I did so well. I ended up getting 2 out of my 4 goals. One of them that I failed at was to grow the Resourceful Designer podcast audience. Now, I have to say, this was a tough one. When the pandemic hit in 2020, my podcast listenership, like many other podcasts out there, took a big hit. And the reason for this were a lot of people listen to podcasts on their commute to and from work. And with most people stuck at home, this eliminated their commute, and those people didn't have time in their day to listen the way they used to. And a lot of people dropped off, and I'm sorry to say that many of those people just didn't pick up the podcast anymore. Now, I was hoping that this year, as things started getting back to normal, that my numbers would tick back up, but they're still way, way below what they used to be before the pandemic hit. Now, I'm hoping that that is the reason, that it's the commute or people just don't have the time, and not that the quality of the podcast has dropped, that they just don't want to listen anymore. I hope that's not the case. The second goal that I failed at was to talk at more conferences. Now, for obvious reasons, we all thought that things were going to get better much quicker, and they didn't. I failed at this one. I had the opportunities, but I decided not to do any traveling this year. And I did talk at 2 virtual conferences at the beginning of the year, but I really didn't enjoy the experience of doing a virtual presentation. And it really didn't get me much from it. So I opted out not to apply for any more of those. Now, goals that I set out that I did accomplish are to grow the Resourceful Designer community. It is growing, although not as fast as I would like, but it is growing. The community is my pride and joy. I know that one day when I'm no longer doing this podcast, and there will be a day where I'm going to say, enough's enough, I will look back at everything that I did with Resourceful Designer as a whole, and I'm sure that the community will be my proudest accomplishment. I can tell you that the friendships that people are forming within the community and the help that is so freely given to each other is more than I could have ever hoped for when I started the Resourceful Designer community. Now, if you're not a member of the community and you're looking for camaraderie with fellow designers, I highly suggest you check it out. Now, registration will open up again in February, but you could sign up for the waiting list at resourcefuldesigner.com/community. And the fourth goal I had set out for myself was to grow podcast branding. Now, if you're unaware, podcast branding is a kind of, I call it a side business that I started early in 2019, but it's quickly grown to much more than that. And I think, although I haven't really announced it, I think I might have actually pivoted this year from podcast branding being a side business to being my main business. Because I know financially, I'm making much more money with it than I am with my regular design business. So growing that business, that goal was accomplished. Now let's look at some of my numbers from 2021. With Resourceful Designer, I released 41 episodes of the podcast. That's the lowest episode count in a calendar year since I launched the podcast. But I know I did take several weeks off when my father passed away in June, and there was a couple of other times where just work got so busy that I wasn't able to produce an episode. So I'm hoping that next year I can better that, but we'll see how things go. Now, in 2021, not counting this episode, I've reached over 630,000 total episode downloads of Resourceful Designer. And just over 69,000 of those happened this year alone. Now that is, as I said, that was half of what it was the previous year. So the growth is just not happening like I was hoping, but still very respectable numbers when it comes to podcasts. And one little thing to note is that Resourceful Designer is now available on all Samsung devices. So if you've got a Samsung phone, there's a app, I believe it's called Samsung Free or something like that. Resourceful Designer is available in that app. So that's a new platform that now carries the podcast. Now, as far as my design business goes, COVID-19 continued to affect it in 2021. I lost a few clients due to closures and other various reasons. And many who did remain, that were still around, were affected financially because of closures and stuff to do with the pandemic, that they just didn't have the facilities to hire me this year. So maybe in next year we'll get some more work done, but we'll see. Now, I did do work for 23 different clients in 2021, which was up from only 9 clients in 2020. So that was a big jump, but still nowhere near what I used to do. The sad thing is out of those 23 clients, none of them were new. I didn't gain a single new client in 2021. All the clients I worked for were existing clients. Now, with those 23 clients, I set out a total of 41 invoices in 2021, which was up from 14 the previous year. So big jump there. And as I said, I lost 5 long-standing clients for various reasons. But one thing that did help my business out is I started doing some consulting work for our local business enterprise center. That's a local government or municipally funded organization that helps people start their business. And they received a grant which allowed them to start a program called the Digital Consultancy Program, where they hired professionals such as myself to help startups. And the way it works is the startups will get a free hour of consulting, and the Business Enterprise Center pays for my time. So the client gets it for free, but I still get paid from the Business Enterprise Center. And it was quite lucrative what they were paying as well. So I had a lot of fun, talked to a lot of startups just to help them with their branding, with their messaging, with their marketing. So a lot of fun doing that sort of stuff. And it's nice to get people who are on the ground floor just starting things off and making sure that they do it right. So overall, I did okay with my design business. Not super. As I said, I didn't get any new clients. But I also didn't actively promote my design business at all in 2021. I concentrated all my growth on podcast branding, my other business. So suffice it to say that if you don't promote it, not much is going to happen with it. And that's what's happening with that business. And I'm okay with that. Now, podcast branding, I did projects for 64 different clients this year. And that was up from 51 clients in 2020. Now, that may be a little misleading because it's not that many more clients from 51 to 64, but they were much bigger projects. This year, instead of just ordering like podcast cover artwork, I had several that ordered packages with all sorts of other stuff. So I did work for 64 different clients, and I had some clients that ordered multiple times throughout the year. I had one client that had me design 3 different podcast cover artworks for him, because he had 2 existing podcasts. He wanted his cover changed, and he was starting a new podcast and wanted the artwork on that one. So I still count that as just one client. Now, I launched 9 new websites for podcast clients, which was down from 16 in 2020, almost half. However, These were much bigger websites, and the revenue from these 9 sites was greater than the revenue I got from the 16 sites the previous year. So the 16 sites were mostly just cookie cutter. I have a pre-built website that I use, and I just upload that website to a server, change the photos, change the messaging, but the website's pretty well built. That's what I did last year, where this year people wanted more custom websites, which was very fun. And another thing that helped me out a lot was I was featured as a special guest on 2 podcasts this past year, and that helped bring in a lot of work. I got a lot of people that hired me after hearing me on those podcasts. So I'm looking to do some more of that in the coming year. So those are some of the numbers from Resourceful Designer and my 2 design businesses. Now, looking ahead at 2022, first of all my previous goals will continue and carry over. They do every year. So I still would like to continue to grow the Resourceful Designer community. I would still like to concentrate more on podcast branding, and I would like more people to listen to Resourceful Designer. None of those are ever going to change. But new goals for 2022. For one, with podcast branding, I would like to start some partnerships with other organizations in order to grow what I offer through podcast branding. I already have some ideas. It's just a matter of reaching out and seeing what sort of deals I can make with different partners, so that it would be more services or better services that I would be able to offer in the future. I would also like to expand the Resourceful Designer community. Right now, we already have a great Slack group, lots of communication, but I want to include even more in the community. I want people to get more for their investment. So I'm thinking up some ideas of things we can do or I can do in order to make the community even more desirable for people who want to be a part of it. And as I said, I did some consulting work for our Business Enterprise Center, and I really, really enjoyed doing that. And I think I would like to try to do more of that in the coming year. Now, I don't know if the Business Enterprise Center will get a new grant in 2022. This is a yearly grant, but every year they have to apply, and they don't know if they're going to get it. And so I haven't heard yet if they were going to receive that grant and if they were going to continue this digital consultancy program. I do hope they do, because as I said, I had a lot of fun talking to these startups. Now, none of these startups, just so you know, none of these startups actually became clients. Most of them just don't have the budget to hire me. So when they needed somebody, I recommended some other designers, but it was just fun to get on the ground floor and talk to them. And as I said, it was they had a 1-hour consulting call, and I got paid very nicely for that 1 hour. So those are some of the goals I have for 2022. I also have some pet projects I'm going to work on. Those are not things I really want to discuss, but there's one of them that I've been toying with or playing a little bit with over this past year. While in 2022, I want to concentrate a little bit more on it. It's a project I was starting. If everything goes well, it may help earn me just a little bit extra money every month. Not much, but it's something I started it and I want to see it through. So that's one of my goals for 2022 is to get that project completed. So those are my numbers. That was me in 2021. My podcast business is doing well. My graphic design business, not so much. But then again, I've been concentrating all my time to grow the podcast side of it because I really, really like working in that niche. And let me tell you, it's only been 2 years since I started this business, and I can really see why people say that you should pick a niche. I've always thought, yeah, it makes sense, but I was a generalist and I enjoyed it. But now that I'm actually working in a niche that I have a passion for, man, I can tell you, just designing is just so much fun. And talking to these people that have a similar interest to what I'm helping them with, it's just something that now, if somebody was to ask me, I would say, yes, finding a niche is something that you should really look into. Now, I know it's not for everybody, but when possible, it does help your business grow. This one's only 2 years old, and already it's surpassed the business that I've been running for 16 years. But that's enough about me. What about you? Did you accomplish your goals that you set out for 2021? And what are your goals for the new year? Are you a student getting ready to graduate? What are your goals once you're done with school? Are you still fairly new to the design world? What are your goals to hone your skills and become even better? Or are you a veteran designer like I am? What are your goals to continue your growth? Because you know you can't stay where you are. You constantly have to be growing. Are you a designer who works for somebody else? Maybe you enjoy your job. Maybe you don't. Either way, what are your future goals? Or perhaps you're already a home-based designer, a freelancer if that's the term you like to use. What are your goals for your business to help it grow, to make sure that it succeeds, that it prospers in 2022 and beyond? Wherever you are in the world, whatever your skill level is as a designer, whatever your life situation is, I want you to take some time and look back at this past year, 2021. Think about what you've accomplished. Think about what you failed at accomplishing. And just think about where you were at this point last year. Sometimes, we think about our goals. I did a podcast episode, or I talked about this in a podcast episode recently. Sometimes we think about our goals so much that we forget to see how far we've actually come. And now's the perfect time to think back. Where were you last December, last January? What could you not do then that you can do now? It's very easy to forget the progress that we've already made when we concentrate so much on where we still need to go. And when you do reach one of those goals, one of those accomplishments, don't stop there. Many people do that. They reach a goal and they go, yay, I made it. And then they stop. No, reaching a goal is just a milestone. You have to plow right through them. Be happy with yourself that you reached it, but then reach even further. And what about any shortcomings? Was there anything you failed at? I mentioned a few that I failed at. Well, did those failures discourage you? Or did they create a sense of want even greater than before? Something for you to overcome? So think back. Did you reach the goals that you set out for yourself and for your design business in 2021? And if yes, were you happy with the outcome? And if not, think about what prevented you from reaching those goals. So as 2021 comes to an end, I encourage you to reflect on it. Think about everything you've learned, all your struggles, the thing you fell short on, whether it was your fault or just the state of the world we were in, and of course your accomplishments. And then come up with some new goals and plan to make 2022 your year of success. These past 2 years have been tough on all of us. And I'm hoping that we never have to endure something like this pandemic ever again in our lives. But you know that old saying, what doesn't kill you only makes you stronger? We're all stronger because of it. So remember all the shortcomings, everything from the past 2 years, and use all of the stuff that you've learned to make 2022 even better. Now, just a reminder that this podcast is going on hiatus after this episode, and it will return on January 24th. I'll be back then with more episodes full of advice for starting and growing your design business. Until then, I am Mark Decote, wishing you a Merry Christmas. It's what I celebrate. Maybe it's not what you celebrate, but I'm still going to wish you a Merry Christmas, a Happy Holidays, and I hope you have a wonderful season. And of course, I couldn't end the podcast without saying that no matter what goals you set for yourself for this coming year, the one thing you have to remember is to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.